Greetings and welcome to Tryhard Studio. I am Mark, and in this, our fourth devlog, I will show you how we turn this empty plane into our first tutorial scenario for the exploration, investigation and navigation of our game. All of this coming up next. Remember all the weeks I spent literally grinding stone in Blender? The countless and countless hours and days working on the mundane task of modeling dozens and dozens of similar but different elements of decoration? No? Well, I do remember. How could I forget? But finally, today we cash in. If everything turned out as planned, this week we reap the fruits of such slow and tedious work. And that's because in addition to working as decorations and barriers that delimit areas, our stones should also work as one of our main navigation resources. But well, now moving on to the important part of how we started the design process of this scenario. Once we have the concept defined, which in this case was the one inspired by the open levels in the Tomb Raider games, we started with the distribution of areas and volumes. In the previous devlogs, we had commented on how we wanted to introduce these horizontal navigation elements with occasional vertical access islands, which offer new connections and alternatives to the player as a reward for exploration. With this in mind, we started throwing general elevations and volumes, nothing too specific. We just started experimenting with our terrain to allow us to visualize what routes and paths could be interesting to our player. Being an introductory scene, we want the design of this scenario to encourage experimentation, invite and reward the search for alternative routes, and direct the player to consider future complexity and depth. Without it being too overwhelming or confusing for the moment, we'll have time for that later. Here we have our general distribution and paths. I also want to take this opportunity to show some of the new textures and variations created by Ellie, which will serve to give more life and contrast to our scene, but also, and very important, to give clear visual references to assist and guide our player in the world. I think the textures fit quite well, but as usual I'm not completely satisfied with the models in the arrangement and mesh of the leaves, so I will continue working on them on my downtime. This is the general idea of using color and contrast as visual reference, but please ignore the bold tree in the background. We need to add more designs and colors to our leaves, but that's the reason we started working on the scene, to see what other resources will be necessary. In the same way, we took the opportunity to test our plants and flower package, link in the description of the video, to make sure we can use it to dress the scene properly. In addition to making the environment more pleasant, it also allows us to hide the stretched textures of the terrain, and in the same way that with the trees, this way we can notice the resources we still lack. Later, I want to start working on a package of ground covers, like more types of grass, moss, smaller flowers, with fewer polygons, fungi, herbs, weeds, among other things. Right now, there's no need to take this scene to the final state, but ideally we want to get it as close as possible, without entertaining ourselves too much in the small details. There will be a fairly extensive period to fine-tune details later. For now, our priority is to have a diverse testing area to work on the main mechanics of our mobility. This is the state in which we leave the scene for the moment. In general, I think it meets quite well with what we hope to achieve in this first instance. In addition to defining the visual language, we are also defining the use for mechanics, and although there's still a lot of work in that aspect, for now we can climb the edges in the range of our jump, and for next week I hope to implement the mechanics of climbing creeping plants and vines to offer the player more routes and shortcuts. We also want our character to react dynamically to these steps by pulling itself over them without the need to jump to make the movement more organic and natural. Please ignore the disaster in the perimeter rock formations. Re-exporting some of these rocks ended up breaking a few existing prefabs, but it was necessary to work on and refine the previous arrangement either way. As for the reason we'll direct you to explore these platforms, we are planning to introduce a chicken collection mission, very much on par with your work within the farm, for which you must find the tracks and clues such as traces of feathers and chicken footprints in the field down different paths. I must add, this was not an original idea in the slightest, but at least is consistent with the setting. We also want to introduce a persistent mechanic between scenarios, through small temples and ancient shrines, connected with the spirits and energies from the surroundings. These collectibles will offer an additional reward to exploration, but they will also serve as an introductory bridge to the paranormal phenomena you will face later. It will be one of our main resources to introduce the insinuation of extraordinary forces and influences alien to the mundane experiences and routine of our character. Or, in less pretentious words, it will be a way to prepare the attentive for the dark elements one will have to face. If any of these captures your imagination, why not join us by subscribing as we discover the ways to realize all of our ridiculous and ambitious ideas? That, or maybe a like or advice in the comment section, will really motivate us to strive with this project. I mean, just look at how the texture of gravel and dirt run out of pebbles in the center of the road. Isn't that the mark of a great game? No? Is it just me? Well, maybe, but Ellie is also about to finish the texture of dirt with a little grass and gravel to remove, to some extent, the gradient between the textures of our terrain. In addition to that, this week she will also work on finishing more textures and variants for the leaves and bark of our trees. And for my part, I will focus again on coding to introduce the dynamic of climbing ladders and vines, and if all goes well, solve the ascent of high steps with high detection in our state machine. With this, we end the report of the week. Again, thank you very much for staying with us until the end of the video. There is still a lot of work to be done, but we are very happy with our progress within this first month, and we can't wait to see how everything continues to develop. I am Mark from Tryhard Studio. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a lot of success in your projects, and see you soon.